The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. Hello and welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. And we have a special guest today who actually comes from the big business world. And so I want to clarify that we are not anti-big business. The point of that intro is that you have a responsibility to your communities. And big businesses continue to grow and continue to thrive while maybe we're not taking the actions that we need to take, that you need to take to make as strong of a business as you can, to cement your footprint, to make that impact that you can. So this is absolutely a call to action for you to step up. And there's a lot that we can learn, from the continued improvements, the research and development, and just the best practices that come with big business. And so we've got somebody who has been able to thrive through his own entrepreneurship journey while working for a big business. He's thrived by writing books and being able to use that personal branding to be able to help him build that trust and be able to prospect and be able to build those relationships. And so we're really excited to learn about his journey and how he's helped other businesses. So we're excited to have Carson V. Heady with us here today, author of Salesman on Fire, and he's also a fellow podcast host. So once we come right back from the break, we're going to introduce him and get going. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, we're back. And hey, Carson, how you doing, man?
Matt, so good to see you.
You too. As we were saying before, it's kind of been a while. We've known each other for years, but man, remember those days of the live events where people would see each other in person?
Vaguely. I vaguely do. It's great to see you. I think, we were just commiserating that I believe the last time we saw each other was at an event, obviously a few years back. And it's good to start getting back to some of those things again. But thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And again, Carson, you're a pretty decorated salesman, aren't you? You've been a number one salesman for Microsoft many times, correct?
You know, I've been very fortunate in my sales career, yes. And I think your intro was spot on. It's one of those scenarios where I've been on both sides of the coin. You know, I have my personal brand and a lot of the work that I've done as a speaker and as a coach and a consultant, which actually predates and is during my time at Microsoft. I've worked for small consultant firms, and I've worked for two very large organizations, Microsoft and AT&T. So hopefully I can offer some feedback and guidance today that resonates with your audience.
Absolutely. Well, we want to definitely dig into that whole concept of personal branding and how you've been able to use that being an author and being a speaker and being able to leverage that to be able to grow your business or your book of business as well. But first of all, I just got to ask you, tell us a little bit more about like your entrepreneurial journey. Like, where did you first kind of get that bug to kind of do that something on your own and kind of create something on your own, like with the book and all that?
Love the question, Matt. It's one of those things I always approach things a little bit differently. I'm one of those
Yeah.
folks that I ask questions, and if there's a problem or a blocker, I'm always looking for, okay, what's the way we're going to scale this wall, right?
Hmm.
I was also super, super passionate about selling and leadership and career and some of those key elements. And so I tried to, in essence, create a very diversified portfolio of ways that I wanted to, to broach and stoke those fires, right? Because for me, I loved coaching leaders and I loved coaching sellers. And I had the scenario back, it was over a decade ago now. I always had the desire to write a book, to create in that regard. And so it was a number of things, but part of it was that creation of content, putting something out there that made my resume stand out, or that made me stand out from a social perspective. Then there was, doing video content, and then there might have been blogging, and all of these different things, and these contributions that were out there that helped me stay top of mind in certain regards, going out and following followers of people that were influencers that were doing what I wanted to do so that I could connect with like-minded folks or people that might have a different perspective. And so for me, it was about creation and contribution, but it was also about connecting. Those three C's were really vital for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and when you say like contribution, is that kind of that impact that you felt like you wanted to make, or is that kind of more about like just tell me a little bit more about what contribution
Sure.
really means to you?
Yeah, I mean, it could be any number of things. It can be the tangible contribution of, hey, I created a blog or a video, and leverage these types of things to stay top of mind and to have figure out where does that message resonate. But the other, maybe intangible, sometimes is just showing up with value or point of view. How can I create a relationship, and what's my unique superpower that I believe I can bring to the table? What type of, to your point, what type of impact do I believe I can have? What are the outcomes that I believe that I can drive? And, when you're starting out, yeah, I remember, I always find it, and rightfully so, often a lot of people tell me, because I've become very well known for digital selling within Microsoft. And they're like, hey, yeah, it's probably easy when you've got that logo on your back. I cut my teeth doing this stuff before Microsoft. I was at a very small consultant firm for some time, for about a year prior to even joining Microsoft. That's where I started using a lot of these digital tools there. And then when I was marketing my book, or when I was, creating content. And then even today, just picking up little things like you're doing, like, doing podcast, and how can I engage people, learn, get key perspectives. So those are the types of contributions that I think are key. Is think about, your audience, where are they? What are the different types of things that I can do to engage? How do I show up with value? And then what unique superpowers can I parlay into successes for other people?
So value, that's kind of that core of that concept of contribution for you. What kind of value can you bring to the table for, I guess, the community, kind of as you were saying before, that you're trying to build, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's very, I always look for, what's the problem that I can help solve, or what is the scenario that I can make better, or what is something that I know about that I can show up with a unique point of view. I think it's important to lean into your competition and figure out, okay, what are they strong with, but also, where may they not be strong that I can show a strength. And then that's an area where I can capitalize, and being cognizant that, look, there's going to be other folks out there that can do what I do, but they're not going to do this a certain way. This is my unique strength. This is what I can lean in very heavily on. So I think there's a lot of benefit to doing SWOT analysis of the others in the market, the others that are doing similar things to what you're doing, because that can really give you your niche and that area that you want to double down on. And then you've got three things that you can really control when you're making outreach and trying to create and forge these relationships. You can control the quality of your messaging. So, what research have you done? What point of view are you showing up with and why? You can control the quantity of your outreach. You and I both know that if I reach out to 5, 10 executives in organizations, my chance of getting a meeting might be small. But if I reach out to 100 or 1,000, that goes up exponentially. And lastly, you can control your consistency. How often are you going out and making those social posts, writing those blogs, and engaging with your audience in an effective manner over time? Those are the things that you can control. So control those controllables.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you were getting into the professional world, there had to have been, you mentioned that there were some big influencers that you started following.
Yep.
Who do you feel were like the biggest influencers that really inspired you to do what you're doing?
It was the people I wanted to be. And I love that you call that out, because this was 2010. I had just written this book, right? My publisher at the time was like, go open some social profiles. And I knew nothing about Twitter at the time. Still don't know that I do, right? But, just going out and creating these social profiles, creating blogs, blogging sites. But for me, like going out and I thought about like, what do I want to do? What image do I want to create? What types of followers do I want to engage? So I look at people like Jeffrey Gitomer, Jeb Blunt, Grant Cardone, people that were very prominent in the sales leadership, thought leader realm. And so for me, I was going out and I was following them. I was, trying to learn from their content and how they were engaging, what was deemed as engaging, and then trying to connect with their followers, people that obviously had a penchant for following sales thought leaders, leadership thought leaders, and people that had written books. And that was what I was trying to create at the time. This was 12 years ago, almost 12 years ago. And so, and it was a slow burn, right? I mean, nothing happened overnight. But the amazing thing is, I always like to say, like, my entrepreneurial journey always fed everything else that I was doing, whether I was working at a small organization, which I had a few that I worked with in between AT&T and Microsoft, but it's also the impact that it's had for my brand here, even at Microsoft, has been tremendous, because I can use those key learnings that I've had and I can infuse them into what I do. And the gist of it, Matt, is build a community around what you're doing. Find those people, whether they are like-minded or whether they offer a unique perspective. There's value in all of that. Get them in the boat with you, learn from them, share ideas with them, build a council around that, take their feedback, and just, like we were talking about, show up with value. And I've been doing that every day for the last 12 years. And I have to pinch myself, the position that it's put me in. It's been amazing. A fun ride.
So what would you say is like the biggest difference between working or using this and leveraging it for working with the small companies versus the big company? Like, are there different waters that you have to navigate, or what's some of those biggest differences?
Yeah, it's a very astute observation. It is, when you don't have a big logo, there are pros and cons to it. Because because I work for Microsoft doesn't mean everybody wants to talk to me by default. In fact, we've gone through our own transformation over the last several years. So a lot of what we do is try to, ensure that the connotation of Microsoft is the company that we are today, the one that we've transformed into. But I think the big element is any preconceived thought that people have isn't necessarily going to be there if it's just me reaching out, or if it's, I'm working for a consultant firm or smaller organization. It takes the way that I approach it is completely different from a messaging perspective, but a lot of the fundamentals are the same. Because again, I go back to my big three. My messaging is going to look different. What I believe the value that I show up with is going to look different. But the quantity of outreach that I make is very much built on, I call it a Moneyball approach. I love that movie. It focuses on the data elements of sports, in this case, baseball. I make a lot of sports and career and sales and leadership analogies. And I think, where it really helps you is from a data perspective. I know that if I resonate this message with 100 people, I'll probably get a conversation, and I'm willing to do that. But you also get some key learnings because you can start to see like what's working, what's not. I mean, I've tweaked messaging for 12 years on different things that I've done from an outreach perspective. And I don't purport to know the best way to do any of these things. I talk to people. I've learned from others. I've learned from doing. And I think that's the key element is to go do, go create. Not everybody's necessarily comfortable making a video. Not everybody's comfortable necessarily making a blog, but go out and create and, be willing to do the outreach, and magical things will happen over time. It's like investing in the stock market. We've seen at times it can be very tumultuous, but it's statistically proven that if you put your money in a diversified stock portfolio over 20 years, you'll make money. I mean, that is statistically proven. So very similar approach here. If you're investing in relationships and you're investing in your process, you'll be successful. It may not happen on the timetable you desire, but it will happen over time. And I think that was the key element. So there's a lot of similarities doing it, just branding Carson versus doing outreach to executives while I'm at Microsoft. I've learned a lot by doing both.
Mm-hmm. So if we kind of were to think about all of the trials and tribulations that you've had throughout the years, looking back, what would you maybe tell your 16-year-old self? What advice would you give him?
I'd say cut your hair and grow your network. That was the biggest thing that I failed in early on. Is my first real 9 to 5 was as a sales rep at AT&T, right? Southwestern Bell at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed a penchant for this. I had a lot of results. I was promoted a few times very swiftly. But I thought that I could leverage that experience to go just about anywhere. And I was dead wrong. We're in a relationships environment, no matter where you are. Relationships. I look back on my career, and almost every meaningful move that I've ever made has been because of a relationship. The only one that wasn't was after AT&T, and I got picked up by a small organization, but only because the reason my resume stood out was because I had written the book. That was it. That's why I got in the interview. So the key element is how are you going to create these conversations and relationships? So if I'm talking to my younger self, I'm saying double down on people and process. Really understand the relationships that are going to matter. You never know where these folks that you're talking to today, whether it's a colleague or a client, you never know where they're going to go. And every meaningful, I look back in my career, and even just winding up at Microsoft was very serendipitous. Because of my book, I had gotten noticed to work at this small organization. Because of doing prospecting on LinkedIn, I actually made a connection that led me to a consultant firm. And then there was a relationship that I had made at the first organization that pulled me to my next role. And then I met someone there that ultimately recruited me to Microsoft. You never know where these moving pieces are going to go. And so all you can control, again, back to controlling the controllables, you can control the investments that you make in people and process. And so really invest in relationships. Make sure your network is strong. I love the quote, your network is your net worth. And I'm a firm believer in that. So no matter what you're doing, relationships are going to be the most important thing, because talking about the Moneyball element, the highest probability is a warm relationship, warm intro, warm recommendation, warm referral. That is the top of the top. And so the more you can focus on relationships, the better you'll be.
So when did you first have that aha moment about relationships?
I was probably what you would call a lone wolf in my AT&T days. I was very much an individual contributor. I had a lot of individual success. I didn't have a lot of coaches or mentors early on in my career. And, I didn't understand the team element. And I was in environments where I could have done more in that regard, but I didn't have that real kick in the pants until a few years later. And when I really realized, it was making the transition also from being in a cold call, one call close type of an environment. It was the transition going from that into more of an enterprise selling and longer sales cycle, or working at a consultant firm where I had to lean on the superpowers of my peers, realizing in a very humbling way that I was surrounded by a lot of people that were a heck of a lot smarter than I was when I had that realization. Because early on in my career, when I was a one-call closer, or when I was a manager, when I was a director who was tasked with basically starting a department, I always felt like I had to be the smartest person in the room. But it was when I realized that I was a lot more powerful when I was in the boat with all of these other brilliant minds. That's when I realized it. And it helped me tremendously working for, 3 smaller organizations in between AT&T and Microsoft. I walked into Microsoft a completely different person. And I was, making a sports analogy. I felt like here I can be, I felt like I would be like a sixth man, right? Like on a basketball roster. I felt like if I can contribute in some way, and I was surrounded by a lot of people that were younger than me, that were a lot more technically savvy. Look, my background was in consulting and telecommunications and advertising. I really had on paper, I didn't necessarily belong there, but the person that recruited me believed I'd be effective. And so that realization came to me when I realized how much better my results and the team's results and frankly, customer and client outcomes would be when I embraced that team mentality.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a unique perspective, I think, because you've got that entrepreneurship journey, and as well as working for big business and being in the sales world and the prospecting world. So what values do you feel are like the most important for succeeding in your profession and how you operate?
Yeah. You can go very far on energy and vision and excitement and adrenaline and all of those things. But what I think really the tail of the tape is your resilience. And like I go back to Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich. And I think about, what stood out to me the most in that book was that most people that find success find it after the majority of others would have already given up. And for me, like I've lost jobs through no fault of my own. I've had some very unfair things happen to me. I've had relationships that soured. I've had tough years. But through those losses, you can decide, you got a couple of decisions. You stay the course, you reconfigure a little bit, you regroup, you rebuild, or you lay down. And I won't lay down. There's a reason that for the stuff on my wall, Rocky Balboa is up there, and that is a constant reminder of the line from Rocky Balboa, the film that came out in 2006, where it's a speech to his kid, and it talks about the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a mean and nasty place. The gist of it is only you decide if you're going to stay down when life knocks you down. And so for me, that was the biggest key learning is I've had just as many losses, probably more than most, because I am not afraid to put myself out there. It also reminds me, too, of that quote from Michael Jordan, my favorite athlete ever. He's missed more shots than anyone, but guess what? He's considered the greatest ever. And the reason why is because he kept coming back. He kept reinventing himself, looking for new challenges, but he stayed the course, and he was a champion. And that's what we all have to do. That's the kind of mindset we have to have. So resilience for me is number one, that mental toughness, and constantly being on a quest for learning, constantly thirsting for learning. I recently started working in the healthcare space. So I work with a lot of, clients, but also partners and vendors in the healthcare space. And it's very rewarding for me to be able to leverage what I'm passionate about to drive outcomes in healthcare. I'm humbled by that experience. But I would say the most amazing thing about all that, Matt, is that you think about, these key elements of what got you here, and you start to realize, like, there were some times where the future wasn't clear. You don't have to know what the future is going to look like. You just have to put one foot in front of the other, and you've got to stay true to yourself and to your vision. And if you do those things, you will be successful. It may not happen on the timetable you want it to.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so resilience and just having that quest for learning. And some of that learning is, that I guess I've seen is being interested in what the next moment's going to bring.
That's it. I mean, thinking about, where do you want to go? Where do you want to take this? Right now, I mean, I'm consuming all kinds of trade magazines, so I understand, and I can stay at the pulse of what matters to clients and potential clients and partners. Every bit of work that I do, because a lot of our work is through valued partners, which are, often smaller organizations. Don't get me wrong, there's some very large partners, but there's some that are relatively small shops. And, it's critical to stay at the pulse of what matters to these organizations so that I can adequately invest, whether it's time or resources or, selling people internally on leaning into the cause. These are all very important things. No matter what your role is, you're always going to have to understand how to influence and how to help others understand why they should get engaged or why they should change their current course. So I think those things matter a great deal, but you're not going to be able to do it effectively unless you're living in their world and you're seeing things through their eyes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dig into more about what it takes to build that personal brand, and what does digital selling really mean? How does all this stuff fit together? So we'll be back here after a quick message from our sponsors. Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and we're back here with Mr. Carson V. Heady. And we were talking about, he was sharing his entrepreneurial journey on building his own personal brand, how he's moved from working with small consultants groups, crawled sometimes. Yeah. Maybe like a log roll here and there. Like, did you ever watch He-Man and notice he only log rolled?
That's so true. That's so true. If it's good enough for him, it's definitely good enough for us.
It was one of my observations as a kid, why does he only log roll? Well, because of the limitations of the animation, I guess. But
they don't have that anymore. That he's making a comeback, right?
Yeah. I think he can actually do a frontward roll, maybe even a few flips here and there. So. True. But so we're talking about the personal branding and how you've had that journey between big business and small business, and how you've been able to leverage your entrepreneurial spirit for even working with Microsoft and earning multiple rewards in the sales arena. All right. So I want to go back to this. We were talking about digital selling. You said you kind of were an early pioneer, as it were, for digital selling. What is digital selling?
Yeah, digital selling is this concept of leveraging all the digital tools at your disposal to go out and understand your audience. You can look up a lot of different things about your customer, about your target prospect. You can understand, do we share an alma mater? Is there a similar group we're in? Do we have similar folks we follow? Whatever that springboard could be for a conversation. It's also because your audience is often very much out there in social presence. It gives you this capability to open doors that may not have been able to be open to you previously. So when I think about where I started doing this, and I often say, I cut my teeth doing this at small consultant firms. I was leveraging social media and, Twitter and LinkedIn to create relationships when I was working with small, wireless retail stores as a consultant and helping them market for relatively inexpensive. It was like guerrilla marketing and doing relatively inexpensive outreach because we could go out, follow followers, engage with folks that were engaging with that type of content, and we could find our target audience. When I was working at a consultant firm prior to Microsoft as well, we were leadership, sales consultants, right? And so the goal was to go out and find some of these executives. And, leveraging these tools, you could go out, you could find the executive, you could send them a connection request or a message or, whatever it was. And I brought in one of the largest customers of this organization while I was there. It was just being able to use these tools to, solve the problem or to, whatever's in front of you. What's the task? What's the mission statement? What's the goal? You can leverage digital tools in order to unlock these doors, create relationships, and stay at the dance, stay top of mind.
Okay. So that all fits into that personal branding conversation, I think, as well. So what is the difference between personal branding and like branding for a business?
Yeah. And look, both are so vital, right? Branding comes down to reputation and perception, public perception. What do I want to be known for, whether it's me or whether it's an organization? But the differentiating factor where it splits off is, obviously your company, your organization, that is going to be known as something. But there's a lot of folks now that are thought leaders or influencers in different areas. And, a lot of that is you got to be very intentional. And, what do I want to be known for? What do I want to contribute? And I have to also, again, backpedal to say, a lot of my stuff happened by happenstance, right? I wanted to write a book and I was passionate about selling and leadership and the things that I thought that I could add that were unique. I wrote a book. It didn't light the world on fire at first. It was, I think they say like 95% of books sell less than 100 copies. I've been very fortunate that mine have done, have surpassed that. But like the first book right out of the gate, there was some built-in audience, but I had to figure out a way of creating and promoting this and also standing out. A lot of people doing what I did, right? And very effectively at that. So that's why I created a very unique spin to my book. It was more parable-esque. It was a book inside of a book. There was a fictional protagonist who wrote a sales book. So I wrote 2 books in one, and that was kind of my unique spin to it. So think about unique ways that you can do what you want to do and what's the impact that you can have. But it's taken me every bit of 12 years to have the brand that I have today. Don't get me wrong. There's little pieces that come along the way. But, we were talking about this before. Like I recently added podcast hosts to my portfolio. And that happened also very much by happenstance. In 2020, I was lamenting to a friend of mine on a virtual call. I was like, man, I miss just sitting around talking about sales. And we started doing these recorded sessions and putting them out there to start conversations, right? And then I had people reach out to me and like, hey, I'd love to be on your podcast. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't have a podcast. I don't want a podcast. That implies commitment. I don't have the opportunity or the ability. I've got a family of 5 and a full-time job. I don't have the time or ability to do a drop every Tuesday of a show. But what I started doing was just recording these conversations and putting them out there. And they just took off like wildfire. The level of engagement that I was getting, and I was very opportunistic. We had a platform even internally at Microsoft a few years back for curated content and, sharing that curated content. And so I was doing a lot of that. But because I had such a strong social following, I over 12 years, I've amassed 330,000 followers through my sales and leadership influence. And I was number 1 in Microsoft, all of Microsoft for these, for engagement of these social shares. So I became known as like the top LinkedIn sharer in Microsoft. And then I started having results from creating relationships that would never have happened without LinkedIn, which ultimately led to deals. But that was a slow burn. When I first started doing this, people were like, "Oh, Carson, he's just playing on LinkedIn. He doesn't, I don't know if I understand what he's doing." I didn't have the results to back it up yet. But when multi-million-dollar deals started coming in that would have never existed without LinkedIn, people started taking notice. They'd ask me to train and coach, and then that bubble grew bigger. Now it's global. I did a session last week, presented to 100 managers in Asia, and just could have never fathomed where it would go. But I think that's the key element: is stay true to yourself and what you want to be known for. Put things out there, start conversations. Don't be afraid to fail. Invest in relationships. Know all of your resources, and just keep moving and say yes to opportunities.
Yeah. So I think that is a key component though there, because you said it a happenstance, like you just kind of fell into it. The big differentiator though is a lot of people have really good ideas. It's about saying yes and taking action on it, right? So I think you need to give yourself a little bit more credit for that. So how do you find, I guess, that motivation to say yes? Because sometimes it can be kind of really, really scary, and there's a lot of commitments that you have right now. So how do you get that? How are you able to manage that whenever you say yes?
There in losses, I developed kind of a fearlessness, because it was like, what's the worst that can happen? Like I lose my job, or I get a big deal lost, or whatever it is. All that stuff's happened to me, so it doesn't faze me anymore. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I value relationships, and I value my colleagues, my teams, my leadership. Those are things I'm afraid to lose. But I think the key element is that you've got to understand your parameters. What am I operating in? Like, right? I mean, who's the audience? What are my mediums? What can I put out there? And I appreciate what you said, Matt, because it's one of those things. Like, I'm a big believer. We create our own luck. I'll also make reference. That's why my poster for the color of money is back there, because of the line. For some players, luck itself is an art. Knowing how to understand the playing field, understand the parameters and all the variables, control the controllables. And I'm a believer in probability. Why I don't gamble anymore? Because I know the house wins. But in your life and in your career, you can control things, and you can enhance the probability of success. You can control your mindset. You can control what you do with those great ideas that you're having. And not every one of them has been a fire, right? For me, like I told you, I wrote Birth of a Salesman 12 years ago, and it didn't like blow up out of the gates. There was a curiosity factor from my old coworkers, but I mean, it wasn't something that just took off. It wasn't, you don't just do one thing and stop. I've had some phenomenal years, award-winning years, but like a great championship sports team, you got to come back and you got to do it again, and the expectations are now higher. And so I think the key element is, you've got this great idea. Does it solve a problem? Is there something compelling about it that is going to influence someone to change? And then lastly, are you willing to be a differentiating factor? I've had a lot of people tell me over the years too, like, Carson, I've worked with you, or I've signed with you. You're more expensive, but the reason that I work with you is because you're so communicative. You're transparent. You cared about what mattered to me. I spent a lot of time really investing in those relationships and asking them, look, if we work together, what does that relationship ideally look like? Where have you maybe been burned before in, consulting or, partner types of scenarios? Where have those types of relationships worked well? What do you like about your current solution? What do you not like? And sometimes even telling them, look, maybe we're not a fit today, but if you do ever need me for this or that, I'm here. And they can see me because we're connected, and I'm top of mind because I'm making posts, and maybe they think something's relevant. I mean, it's been years. It's sometimes between the time where I connected with someone and I did business with them. But we were always in that same circle of influence. We might have shown up to an event together. We rekindled the conversation. People move around. You never know where they're going to go. And I think those are the key things that you can control. So being able to figure out what is my brand? How am I going to be intentional about that? How am I going to leverage what I know and what I'm good at and what I care about to stay at the pulse of what matters to the people that I want to do business with? And then how am I going to invest in those relationships? And how am I going to do that at scale? How am I going to do that over time? I try to apply all of those fundamentals to give myself the best probability of success.
Okay. So when you're looking at your personal branding and your early journey with it versus your journey now, where is the best place that you've learned to really to start with that kind of through trial and errors? Help us kind of cut through some of that time lost and maybe in money lost. So what is the best place if somebody's wanting to create that personal brand? Where do they start?
Yeah, you got to think about your audience first.
Okay.
Who do you want to create relationships with? I'll be fully transparent. My journey has been challenging because I have this dual role, right? I want to be in the conversation and part of the sales cultural thought leadership, but I also meet executives every day with major healthcare organizations. They don't care about my sales awards. They don't care about any of those things, but I have a balancing act, and it works okay. But it's very distinct differences. Think about your audience. Who do you want to create relationships with? What is your perspective? How do you show up uniquely? And then think about these two things. Think about these two things. What are the relationships you want to create? Like, write out your dream list. What are 10, 20, 30, 50, dream clients or dream relationships that you could create? Carve them out, figure them out, right? The other element is, what are your mediums? Now, as I mentioned, not everybody's going to say I'd throw me on video. I didn't start out doing video, and I went many, many years where I didn't leverage video. I've written blogs that nobody's read. I've made videos nobody's watched, but I wasn't afraid to create content. And I've also had videos that have had tens of thousands of views, and I've had blogs that have gone viral. It's, those things happen because of, again, probability and controlling the controllables. So think about your mediums. What are the areas where your strengths are going to play? What is your audience reacting to? Are they reacting to blogs? Are they reacting to videos? And then, go out and look at the people that are doing similar work to what you're doing. Understand your competition, but look at the people that are doing similar work, and what are people that follow them engaging with? What type of content? So go out and think about, what mediums you want to invest in. If it's video, if it's, I'm going to blog, I'm going to leverage multiple social profiles and find ways to scale. I want to leverage automation tools to either create or kind of templatize some elements of my approach. You got to be careful with some of that stuff because you can't dehumanize it. You got to make sure that the human element is still at the core. But if you focus on the relationships and your mediums, that is going to really help craft it. And then comparing and contrasting, when I started till now, any of these things that you're doing, my LinkedIn profile is an example. I now, because everybody called what I did a podcast, I'd be remiss not to say, I'm a podcast host. Do I post a podcast every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? No, it's sporadic. It's inconsistent, but it's something that I am, and I'd be willing to connect with others as a result of that. So I get people that reach out to me all the time. Hey, I'd love to be on your podcast. And I'm blown away by some of the conversations that I've been able to have as a result. So you're going to be surprised at what your branding efforts create. And that's a good thing. You're going to be surprised. So just be versatile, be agile in your approach. And like we were talking about before, say yes to opportunities. If somebody reaches out, I may not see it right off the bat. Hey, this would be a good podcast conversation, or I may be really, really busy, but I say yes to a lot of opportunities, and the wonder and the joys that has brought. I could ramble on for hours about it.
Okay. Yeah. So first off, it's understanding that community that you want to build around you and the relationships that you want to be able to create. And then trying to understand what's going on. And I guess I say the heads and hearts, trying to understand what's going on in their heads and hearts. But you said trying to really understand what they like and who they're following and what they're engaging with. And then it's what mediums are you going to get in front of them with? Like, I guess that's kind of part of like, who are they engaging and where are they engaging? Like, or what are they engaging with? Where are they engaging? And so that you can start building that brand there. Then how did you kind of settle upon like the idea of a book? Like, what inspired you to do the book?
I loved writing all my life. I used to enter writing contests when I was younger. I'd write stories about my classmates and my friends and me going to outer space or time traveling or whatever. I just always had that creative flair and loved pop culture. So
Mm-hmm.
something I always wanted to do. Now, when I was at AT&T, I wrote a regular column for a newsletter, and it was all about sales and leadership and career. And I loved it. I loved doing that. So it was, how could I marry the two? But then I thought about it, Matt. It was like, look, this has been done so many times, so many ways better than what I felt like I could do. So I need some unique or fresh take on this. So I created this fictional character who is the protagonist of all 4 of my books. And he basically has these experiences in his career where he learns, sometimes the hard way, but then he funnels that into books that he writes. So I wrote these books inside of books, and each one has a different take. I won't give any spoilers, but each one has a very unique take on what it is as a book inside of a book. That was the original piece for me. And I, like, multiple times over the years, I've said, no, I don't want to go through this process again. I won't write another book. And now I've got 4 of them, and I'm starting a 5th, right? And I don't know when that's, I don't know when that is going to come out or, anything of that nature. It's just that motivation is, I have something unique that I want to say and convey. And I want to create something, and I want to put it out there. That was the impetus initially. And that continues to be the impetus. I've got something unique that I want to say. And then, as you get older, and when I wrote my first book, I was in a very different space than I am now from a life perspective. You get a little bit older, and you got a family and kids, and you start thinking about, like, hey, I'd love someday for, my descendants to say, hey, my dad or my grandpa or whomever wrote this book, right? Or this series. And so it has a very different meaning now. It's like, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to my kids in the future, because it's the lessons that I've learned along the way. But those motivating forces are always begin with, I feel like I've got something unique that I want to say, and I want to create something and put it out there to the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think for people who, not everybody's a writer, but there's a lot of different avenues these days, a lot of different mediums, as you were saying. So, just a quick message to folks out there, like, find your place, I think, and there's also copywriters who can help you. There's book coaches and all that as well. But if you've got, like you said, like something inside that you just got to get out, don't let it sit there, pursue that, say yes and pursue that brand. So, well, I really appreciate your time today. We're coming up on the end of our time together today, but man, so much there that could just be unpacked, and I'm sure we could talk for days. But if you're going to boil it down to I guess, like, what's the one key biggest takeaway that you want people to have in like 30 seconds? What's the biggest takeaway for people to take action on today?
Think about what you're passionate about and the relationships that you want to create, and how can you build a community around that? How can you leverage your unique superpowers to solve problems and equate to wins for the people that you touch, whatever that looks like? If you do that and you stay the course, you pay your dues and you stay the course, you can't help but be successful. You'll create your own luck.
Thank you. And
thank you.
You've got that free book offer right now. The first book is free right now on Kindle.
Birth of a Salesman, the Ultimate Edition, which is the first 3 books, and then the special edition of the first book is all free right now on Kindle. Yes. Okay.
So definitely take advantage of that if you want to learn more about how to be a great salesperson and connect with Carson. His website is carsonvheady.com. And he's out there on LinkedIn, and he's looking for podcast guests too. So, there's lots of ways to connect with Carson. So thanks again, Carson. Really appreciate it. You laid out a bunch of truth bombs for everybody out there today. So thanks again.
Matt, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful